Absolutely.
Hmm.
You know, one of the things we thought before we got on is sometimes your surrounding is not clear, right? And we brought the fact that you have a great background. So those people who are looking to go on camera, we encourage you to go on camera. I've seen plenty of your videos, right? And people are scared to do that. We can overcome those kind of things by different technology skills and just doing it and feeling better about it.
Well, yeah,
You don't even necessarily need to be on actual camera. You can narrate a PowerPoint video or something like that. Like,
yeah,
right.
There's
But
ways
you
around. You can
have to
figure it out.
start doing something.
Yeah.
It's like a GPS. Have you ever been sitting in the parking lot of Target or Walmart or someplace that you're unfamiliar with and you want to get home, and you put your home address into the GPS? If you're sitting in a parking lot, does the GPS tell you where to go yet?
Yeah,
It doesn't. It just shows the parking lot, and it kind of has no idea where you are. It can't really pick you up until you pull onto a street, any street. It doesn't matter. Once you pull onto that street, the GPS immediately picks you up, and then it tells you, oh, you need to turn around or you need to make a right-hand turn, and then it can start giving you course corrections.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel the same way about our entrepreneurial adventures. Is you have to take a path. You have to take some action. Mm-hmm. If you want to be on camera, just be on camera. You'll start figuring out what works and what doesn't work.
We still screw up, right? We've been doing this for a long time.
I've been tweaking my setup for so long. I mean, what you guys are seeing with my background and everything, I've tweaked this over and over and over.
Yeah. But the problem is, if you don't start, like you're saying, you'll never get better, right?
Yeah.
If we keep putting it off and say, well, you know, I don't have the best setup, but if you go back to our first video recordings, they're terrible. But without them, we would never build on to where we're at. In a year from now, we'll be even better again. You're always achieving. So marketing is something I think all us note buyers struggle with. Mm-hmm. What have you done to overcome marketing and things that take a lot of time and energy? What have you done to overcome those?
I think the hardest thing that was for me to do that I finally did was hire a VA. Finding somebody that's a competent VA. It's not just hiring any VA either. You have to find somebody that is competent in the creative area. Because like we said before we went live, a lot of times being note investors, real estate investors, being creative on Facebook is you don't have the bandwidth. You don't have the time because that's a whole nother set of software that you have to learn.
Yeah.
To do those creative things. And it's so much easier to pay somebody to do those for you. You create the content. So like with my channels, I create the content, and then my VA sends me, what he's planning to post, and I review it and make sure that all the wording's accurate. I'm good with everything. And I've built a relationship with this guy where it's much more seamless. It was a lot of work at first, and as time is gone, it's getting to where now I could shoot a video and send it to him, and a couple of 3 hours later, he shoots it back to me. I look at it. This is what we're going to post today. Great. Go with it. And so it just makes it so much more streamlined and easy to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we're looking forward to Note Expo, right? Coming up.
Oh, yeah.
And what are some advice you can give people who are looking to attend Note Expo? What would you say is how do you make the most out of the conference coming up? Because Note Expo is connected to Note School. It's a branch of it. For those who may be brand new, or how can they make the most of it? Because we always talk about you're spending time and money, time away from your family and money to go down to this place and network. How can you get the most out of it?
I think to get the most out of it would be one, look at the schedule and look at things that interest you on the schedule of speakers. What topics are coming up that are topics that you're really interested in? That's good. The next thing is there is a Note Expo app. So download that app, because that's a way that you can actually connect with people, even in your general vicinity. I love the app because you could just connect with everyone that's at Note School. You can see everybody. You can start making those connections. But then once you make connections, start trying to find people that you have maybe you feel like you have some commonality with, that you can build a relationship. The biggest mistake I see people make, you introduce yourself to somebody, you talk for 5 minutes. If they don't see an immediate way that they can get value out of you,
True.
they bump onto the next person. Well, I don't really see a way I can make a deal with you. I got to get going. And they just, you don't hear from them again. Instead of, like you said earlier, dating the person, trying to get to know the person, there may not be an apparent deal right away. People act like, well, if I can't see a deal in this relationship in the first 20 minutes, I'm out. And I think especially if you're a newer person and you don't have a huge network already, and you're trying to build that network, then start with making friends. Start with figuring out, how can you bring value to somebody? Don't look at it as, what can they do for me? Look at it as, okay, what do I have? How can I bring value to somebody? Yeah, and it depends on the person. It varies. Yeah, but it's the relationship. It's making friends with people.
Yeah, I remember we've talked about this before a little bit, but I remember my very first No conference in 2009, and my goal was to give away 20 business cards. Just that, just to put myself out there, and that was kind of my version of that, and just forcing myself to get to know people.
That's really become tough though too, hasn't it? Because business cards have kind of gone away. It's kind of out of fashion now.
I still use them. I still think they're
too. I do too, but I can't tell you how many times I hand out a card and the person I'm handing one to, they don't have any to hand back.
Or they never reach out to you. I'm shocked by how many times I've given out my cards and how many little emails I get the next week from the people. It is a huge networking, right? So let's shift gears for a second. Seller financing. What are some deals you've come across that got into that either been crazier or understandable, or what are some of the successes or failures you've had with seller financing?
No, sure. Well, so I've had good success in buying performing notes. And a lot of times what people wonder is, well, if I'm going to get into notes, what area do I want to get into? Do I want to get into NPLs, non-performing, or do I want to do creative stuff? And hey, if you're already somebody that does fix and flip, and you're already heavily into the real estate world, and you're turning a lot of houses, creative is always a good option. But if you're not in that, if you're just getting into notes and you're not heavily invested in real estate already, then you're looking at what? Non-performing or performing. And what I've always told people is, look, if you buy enough performing notes, you will eventually have a non-performing note to work on. So you don't have to specifically dive into non-performing.
Well said.
To get your and I figured this out the hard way. I bought enough performing notes, but the great thing about it is I'll give you a plus and minus. So the plus for me is the velocity of cash flow. What people who invest in rental properties don't realize, you're getting back that small amount of rent every month, but you've got all this capital tied up in the asset. And the only way you're going to get that capital out is to leverage your way out of it. Right? Not so with a note. As you start buying your notes and you start receiving that cash flow, you're receiving what? Principal and interest back. So you have this velocity of money. You build up your pool of money, you go buy another note. And then that adds to the stack. The key is not buying one note, just like the key with rental properties is not owning one house. If you're going to do rental, own 20, 30, 40. Well, the same with notes. If you want to make real cash flow in notes, you need to, plan on owning 30, 40, 50 notes. Keep building your note empire, because that's really gets the velocity. Before you know it, you're buying a $150,000 note a month. You've got the money, and it just keeps churning. So that is the positive for me, realizing that. The downside, I'll share a downside, is a lot of new people, they want to do small deals. And I had a small IRA. I had this little IRA that had like $18,000 into it. I'm thinking, well, what can I do with this? Let me get into a small note. I'll buy a small non-performing note, and that'll be fine. Again, this was earlier in my investing career, so I didn't know then what I know now. If you invest in a small note that's tied to a low value asset, it's most likely it has a low value borrower attached to that low value.
Yes.
And this happened to be in Ohio.
What part of Ohio? We all started there.
Warren.
Okay.
Warren, Ohio. So we take the deed. Well, I took the house back deed in lieu instead of foreclosing. Got the house back deed in lieu. However, the city had a notice posted on it, and the house had been condemned.
Ouch.
Yeah, the house had been condemned. So what I didn't realize back then was that the borrower had stopped living in the house and had let the house backslide. So the house was in terrible condition. Yeah. The city of Warren was, very much trying to get rid of these zombie houses. They don't want a lot of zombie houses in their town. So they had a thing on there saying, hey, the house is condemned, and here's all the work that it needs, and you need to give us a $15,000 surety bond. Yeah. And at the time, I didn't know what a surety bond was.
Like, are you sure? I don't need to give a surety.
Yeah, I was like, what's a surety bond? Real quickly, it's an insurance policy that you're going to do all this work. You even have to do it with an insurance company. You have to go to Allstate or certain insurance companies that do these, that issue these, and then you pay 15 grand. Well, guess what? I did this out of a small IRA. I didn't have 15 grand to do a surety bond.
Yep.
So that wasn't an option. And then I find out that the BPO that I had, you ever hear stories about, well, the house I had was on the wrong side of the tracks and the value wasn't what it was supposed to be. Yeah. Well, that happened to this house. Had this house been about 1 mile north of its current location, the BPO values would have been good. Because guess what? That's the comps they used, because those were the only sold comps they had to use was in the better part of town. Yeah. So my house that I thought was worth 65, 70,000 was really worth about 20,000, 25,000 in great shape, not in condemned shape. So it really backed me into a corner. Yes. So the only option was, okay, I've just got to unload this house. I don't have the money to fix it. This wasn't the plan. I gotta eject this thing. Well, now you're trying to eject this thing. So I'm on Facebook Marketplace and I try to get this thing sold. But you also have ticking clock. Yeah. Because the city's saying, hey, we're going to tear this thing down. If you don't get us the surety bond, if you don't show us something that you're going to do something, this thing's getting leveled. Well, I found out that for some reason, investors aren't really interested in houses that are about to be leveled. I don't know why, but they didn't want to buy it. So I ended up taking a loss on the house because I had to sell it for what I could get out of it, which was less than what I paid for the note. So that was a loss that I took, but it was also a very valuable lesson in the importance of the collateral and making sure that the collateral is what you think it is, where you think it is. Yeah. Yeah. And small value deals, hey, there's nothing wrong with a small value deal. You can buy. Look, if I had it to do over again and I only had $18,000 to spend and I'm going to buy a note, I would either buy a partial that was tied to a good asset, or you could buy the tail end of a note that was still tied to a good asset. Find something that's $100,000 house or better.
But we've talked before about on the show is that people go to college and spend all this money to get education, to get a degree, right? And they walk out with no income from it. Sometimes the best thing to do here is go to school. You spend a little money, you learned a whole lesson about investing for a small amount of money. And in college, you don't get that money back, right? The only way to get that money back is to use the knowledge you gained from that deal on another deal and learn from it. So sometimes it's, you can play it safer and go that route, which is great. But on the flip side, the other way of doing it is, did I go to school? And some people say I'd rather